I am 61 years old now, and there are nights when sleep never comes. I lie awake listening to the house settle, listening to my own breathing, and thinking about a night I tried to bury. This happened more than 30 years ago, but it never stayed in the past. Some memories fade with time. This one sharpened. I am telling it now because I am tired of carrying it alone. Because the older I get, the more I understand what it took from me, and because what I learned that night did not stay there. Back then, I was living in northern Arizona, outside a town most people only pass through. It was high desert, broken by pines and long stretches of quiet road, the kind of place where sound travels far and help travels slow. I worked alone back then, doing maintenance and caretaking on a piece of land that had been in my family for generations. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and it kept me close to the land. I thought that closeness meant something. Life was simple then. My days followed the same pattern. Morning light, the smell of dust and pine, the sound of wind moving through the trees. Nights were quiet in a way that felt earned. I slept deeply. That peace is what makes this hard to explain. There was no warning, no sign posted in advance. Just small things at first. Things that didn't belong. A feeling that the land was listening. An unease I couldn't name. Animals acting wrong. Silence where there should have been noise. I told myself I was tired, I had responsibilities, and fear felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. So I ignored that tightening in my chest. I kept working, I kept sleeping. Looking back now, I understand how close I came to walking away. But something held me there. Something patient. Something watching. I have replayed that night in my head more times than I can count. Not because I want to, but because it won't let me forget. What happened changed the way I hear voices, changed the way I trust silence. There are things that wear our faces and use our words. I learned that too late. I'm not telling this to scare you. I'm telling it because some truths don't stay buried, and because what spoke to me that night knew my name. It knew my voice too. Before the forest showed me what it was, I still believed the world followed rules. I was wrong. And once you hear something that shouldn't know you exist, there is no going back. That night was the beginning, even if I didn't understand it then. It was the moment my life split into before and after. I have lived carefully ever since, listened harder, locked my doors, and prayed I would never hear that voice again. Because the last thing it said to me did not sound like a threat. It sounded like a warning. And as I sit here now, decades later, I know it wasn't finished. It was only waiting. Waiting for me to remember, and waiting for someone else to listen before the forest decides to speak again. That is why I am finally telling you what happened. I can't carry it alone anymore. Not after all this time. I grew up believing the land was part of us, not something we owned. My grandfather used to say you don't inherit places like that. You borrow them for a while and hope you leave them better than you found them. The property had been in my family longer than anyone could clearly remember. A stretch of forest and high desert passed down quietly, without paperwork at first, then with old deeds no one ever read closely. It wasn't valuable in the way people think of value. No running water nearby, no cell signal, just trees, rock, and space. As the years went on, fewer people wanted anything to do with it. My father stayed away after my grandfather died, said the land felt off to him, though he never explained what he meant. I told myself that was just grief talking. I was the one who stayed close. I had always liked being alone. I trusted quiet places more than crowded ones. When my father asked if I could take over caretaking duties, checking fences, watching for fire damage, keeping squatters away, I didn't hesitate. At that point in my life, I needed something steady. My marriage had ended not long before. No kids, no real ties keeping me in town. The work gave me purpose, it gave me routine, and it gave me somewhere to belong. There were rules passed down with the land, though none were written. Don't wander too far after dark. Don't follow voices you don't recognize. If something feels wrong, leave it alone. I heard those things growing up, the way you hear old sayings without thinking much about them. I thought they were just stories meant to keep kids close to home. My grandfather had been a quiet man, not one for superstition. But there were moments, small ones, where his voice would change when he talked about the woods. He would pause longer than needed. Look away. Once, when I was young, I asked him if he was ever scared out there. He said, "Respect keeps you alive longer than bravery." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. The family never spoke openly about why they left that land alone more than they had to. There were gaps in stories, missing details, questions that never got answered. I accepted that the way people accept old silence. When I took over the caretaking, I started staying overnight in a small cabin on the edge of the property. It had been rebuilt more than once, always in the same spot, like moving it would invite trouble. That should have stood out to me. It didn't. I was proud to be trusted with it, proud to prove I wasn't afraid of a little isolation. Looking back now, I see how prepared the land was, and how unprepared I was in return. I see how carefully my family had learned to live around something without naming it. That night wasn't the first time the land had been watching us. It was just the first time it decided I was ready to notice. And the worst part is this. If I had listened to my family's silence instead of brushing it off, I might never have heard my name spoken in a voice that did not belong to anyone I knew. I arrived just before sunset. The sky stretched thin and pale over the trees, that hour where the light doesn't quite belong to day or night. The truck tires crunched over gravel that hadn't been disturbed in days, maybe weeks. The forest looked the same as it always had. Tall pines, dry earth, long shadows reaching farther than they should. But something in my chest tightened the moment I stepped out of the truck. The air felt heavier, like it didn't want to move. I told myself it was nothing, just the quiet. I unloaded my gear slowly, taking my time, listening. No birds, no insects. Even the wind felt careful, brushing the treetops without sound. The cabin sat ahead of me, half hidden by trees, its shape dark against the fading light. I remember thinking how still everything was. Not peaceful, just still. The cabin door creaked when I opened it, the sound sharp in the silence. Inside, dust floated in the last strips of sunlight. The place smelled like old wood and metal. Familiar. Safe, I told myself. I went through my routine without thinking, checked the locks, looked through the windows, set my bag down. Routine had always kept fear away. As the sun dropped, the shadows between the trees thickened. They didn't fade the way they should. They gathered. I stepped back outside to finish unloading, and that's when I saw the tracks. At first, I thought they were from a deer. Hoof prints weren't uncommon, but when I knelt down, the shape didn't sit right with me. Too wide, too deep, pressed into the dirt like something heavy had stood there for a long time. I followed them a few steps, telling myself curiosity wasn't danger. They led toward the tree line, then stopped. Just stopped. No drag marks, no scatter, like whatever made them had vanished. I stood up slowly, scanning the trees. The forest stared back. The light was almost gone now, that blue-gray moment where distance lies to you. I suddenly felt exposed standing there, watched in a way that had nothing to do with eyes. I went back inside and locked the door, embarrassed at how fast my hands were shaking. I told myself it had been a long drive. That silence can play tricks on you. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had arrived late to something already in motion. I made a simple dinner and ate without tasting it. Every small sound felt too loud. The scrape of a chair, my own breathing. I kept glancing at the windows, half expecting to see movement. When darkness fully settled, it didn't feel like night. It felt like something closing. I stepped onto the porch one last time to look around. The stars were bright, sharp against the sky. Beautiful. Cold. That's when I noticed something else about the tracks. They weren't leading away from the cabin. They were all around it, circling it, as if whatever made them had walked the perimeter slowly, carefully, learning the shape of the place, learning where I would be. I stood there longer than I should have, my heart beating too loud in my ears, staring into the trees. Somewhere out there, something had already known I was coming. I didn't sleep much that first night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like I was missing something important, like the moment you fall asleep just before a sound wakes you again. Morning came thin and gray. The forest slowly remembered how to breathe. Birds returned one by one. The quiet loosened its grip, just enough to make me feel foolish for how tense I'd been. I stepped outside with a mug of coffee, letting the cool air settle my nerves. Daylight has a way of making fear feel small. I almost laughed at myself. That's when I noticed my toolbox. I had left it by the truck the night before. I was certain of that. Now it sat near the tree line, several yards away, resting upright like someone had placed it there carefully. I stood still, coffee cooling in my hands. Maybe I moved it and forgot. That was the easiest answer. I told myself that was the truth, and walked over to pick it up. The latch was open. Inside, everything was arranged differently. Not stolen, not broken, just shifted. Tools lined up in a way I never kept them, neater than my own habits. A strange tightness crawled up my spine. I scanned the trees again. Nothing moved, no footsteps, no voices, just the wind brushing needles together. I spent the next few hours working, trying to stay busy, fixing fence posts, clearing debris, anything to keep my hands occupied. Still, I kept finding small things wrong. A gate I knew I had closed stood open. Footprints appeared in soft dirt near the cabin. Bare, long, too deep for their shape, and the silence kept coming back, dropping suddenly without warning, like a held breath. By afternoon I started arguing with myself. Stress does things to people, isolation bends your thinking. I had heard that before. I wanted to believe it. Late in the day, clouds rolled in, dragging shadows across the forest floor. The light dimmed faster than it should have. I packed up early, unease curling tighter with each step back to the cabin. Inside, I checked the door twice, then a third time. That's when I heard it. A sound from the trees behind the cabin. Soft, almost gentle. Someone clearing their throat. I froze. It came again, closer this time. Then my name, spoken quietly, familiar, like someone I trusted didn't want to startle me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The voice called again, stretching the syllables slightly wrong. Practiced. Careful. Every warning my family never explained rushed back all at once. Don't follow voices. Don't answer calls you didn't expect. I backed away from the door, heart pounding hard enough to hurt. The voice stopped. Silence returned, thicker than before. I stood there long after, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. But that was worse, because deep down, I knew that whatever had spoken hadn't been guessing. It had been checking. What would you do if you heard your name called from the woods like that? Night came down faster than I expected. The clouds thickened, swallowing the last light until the forest became a solid wall of black. I locked the cabin door and shut the curtains, even though I knew how thin the wood really was. I tried to keep busy, cleaned the counter, checked my phone for a signal I already knew wouldn't be there, read a few pages of an old paperback without taking in a single word. The silence pressed in from all sides. At first it was just small sounds. A branch snapping somewhere out in the trees, the wind brushing against the cabin walls. Normal things, I told myself. Forest sounds. Then I heard breathing. It was faint, almost easy to miss. Slow, measured, not rushed. It didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like someone standing still, trying not to be heard. I held my breath, listening harder than I ever had before. The breathing stopped. A few seconds passed. Then footsteps. They moved around the cabin, careful and light, each step placed with intention. Whoever, or whatever it was, knew where the ground wouldn't creak, where the gravel wouldn't crunch. I stayed frozen at the small kitchen table, my back to the wall, eyes locked on the door. The footsteps paused near the window. I could feel something there without seeing it. Then came the scratching. Long, slow lines dragged across the wood. Not frantic, curious, like fingers testing the surface. My heart hammered so hard I was sure it could be heard outside. The scratching stopped. I waited for it to move on. It didn't. Instead, I heard a knock. 3 soft taps, evenly spaced. I shook my head, pressing my lips together to keep from making a sound. Nobody knocks like that in the middle of nowhere. A minute passed. Then 3 taps again. Same rhythm. I realized then that the sounds were matching my breathing. When I tried to slow it down, the tapping slowed too. Panic crept up my spine in cold waves. I moved carefully toward the bedroom, each step measured. The sound outside shifted with me. Footsteps moved along the wall, staying even with my position inside. It knew where I was. I reached the bed and sat down, keeping my back to the wall, knees drawn up. My hands were shaking so badly I had to tuck them under my legs to keep them still. Outside, something leaned close to the wall. I heard the faint scrape of fabric or skin against wood. Then, right outside the bedroom wall, it exhaled. Long, slow, almost satisfied. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the door to give way. It didn't. After a while, the sounds began to drift, footsteps moving away, scratching fading, the forest swallowing it again. I didn't sleep. When morning finally came, pale and weak, I realized something that made my stomach drop. None of the sounds had been random. They had been responses. Whatever was outside that night wasn't wandering, it was learning. And now it knew exactly where I stayed when I was afraid. By the second night, fear had settled into me like a sickness. Not sharp panic anymore. Something quieter. Heavier. The kind that makes every decision feel wrong before you even make it. I spent the day checking the cabin, looking for signs I could explain away. Scratches along the siding, smudges on the window glass, high up, too high for comfort. That copper smell hung in the air again, faint but real, like old pennies rubbed together. I told myself I would leave the next morning, that this was my last night. As evening fell, the forest grew restless. Wind rushed through the trees in uneven bursts. Shadows twisted as the light drained away. I locked the door before dark and sat with my back to it, listening. The first sound came just after night settled. Footsteps, not circling this time, approaching. They stopped right at the edge of the porch. I waited for the boards to creak under weight. They didn't. Instead, something tapped the wall. Once, twice. Then the same 3-knock pattern from the night before. I felt my throat tighten. My chest burned as I tried to breathe quietly. The knocks came again, slower now, testing. Then I heard movement along the roof. Not heavy, not light, just wrong. Like weight shifting in a way that didn't match the shape it should belong to. Dust drifted down from the ceiling beams. I pressed my hands over my mouth. That's when it spoke. Not my name this time. A sound I knew better. The scrape of a chair leg across the floor. It came from outside. The exact sound my chair made when I stood up too fast. My blood ran cold. Then came a cough. Short, dry. Exactly like mine. I backed away, shaking my head, tears burning my eyes. "No," I whispered, even though I knew better than to make noise. Outside, the thing repeated the cough. Slightly delayed, slightly wrong, like someone practicing a role. A shape passed by the window. Tall, too thin. Its outline bent as it moved, stretching and compressing unnaturally. When it paused, 2 points of light reflected back at me. Eyes. They blinked. The smell hit me all at once, metallic, sour, and warm, like blood left too long in the sun. I slid down against the wall, my legs giving out beneath me. My mind raced, searching for rules, for logic, for anything to hold on to. Then it leaned close to the door. I could hear its breathing clearly now, wet, careful. And then, in a voice that matched mine perfectly, it said my full name. First, middle, last, spoken softly, correctly, like it had always known it. I felt something break inside me at that moment. Whatever hope I had left drained away. This wasn't an animal. This wasn't a stranger. It was something that had studied me. The voice spoke again, still using my own. "Open the door." I didn't move. I couldn't. Outside, the breathing slowed, almost disappointed. Footsteps retreated, then stopped just beyond the porch. Silence fell again, thick and heavy. I stayed there until morning, staring at the door, knowing with absolute certainty that whatever was out there now knew more about me than I ever wanted it to. And it wasn't finished. It didn't just know my name, it knew how to be me. Morning felt unreal, like I had woken up somewhere else wearing my own skin. The forest looked normal again. Sunlight filtered through the pines. Birds moved cautiously, testing the air with short calls. I didn't feel relieved. I stepped outside slowly, every sense stretched tight. The smell was still there, faint but sharp, clinging to the cabin like a memory that wouldn't wash away. I walked the perimeter with a length of pipe in my hand, checking the ground. The dirt near the porch was disturbed. Footprints overlapped each other, deep and uneven, circling close. Too close. Some looked almost human. Others didn't. Near the back of the cabin, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A narrow break in the brush. It wasn't a trail. Not really. Just a place where branches were bent back the wrong way, like something tall had passed through without caring what it broke. The ground beyond it was darker, packed down hard. I stood there a long time arguing with myself. Every part of me said to leave. Get in the truck. Don't look back. But another part, quieter, colder, kept pushing forward. The same part that had stayed through the night. I followed the break in the brush. The forest thickened quickly, light dimming under tangled branches. The air felt cooler, damp. The smell of copper grew stronger with every step. My boots sank into soft earth, each footstep too loud in the hush. After a few minutes, I saw it, a shallow depression in the ground, hidden beneath low branches and fallen needles. At first glance, it looked like a natural hollow, but when I got closer, my stomach twisted. The earth was scraped smooth, packed down by repeated use. Claw marks, long and shallow, lined the edges. Bits of fabric were caught on thorns nearby. Old, weathered, torn by something strong. This wasn't a den. It was a place something returned to. I knelt slowly, fighting the urge to gag as the smell hit full force. Metal. Rot. Old blood. Not fresh, but not gone either. Carved into a nearby tree were marks I didn't recognize, long lines crossed by shorter ones, not random, repeated on another tree, and another, like a pattern. I felt watched. The forest around me felt tighter, closer than before. No wind, no birds, just my breathing and the faint sound of something moving far off. I stood up quickly, heart racing. That's when I saw it. High on a tree trunk, well above where any person could reach, were scratch marks running straight down the bark. Deep, violent, like something had climbed down fast, or jumped. A realization settled over me, cold and heavy. Whatever had been outside my cabin hadn't just arrived recently. It had history here, purpose. This land wasn't random to it, and neither was I. I backed away slowly, eyes scanning every shadow, every branch. I didn't turn my back until I reached open ground again. Behind me, deep in the trees, something shifted its weight, not hiding anymore, waiting. And I knew, with sick certainty, that finding that place had changed something. The forest felt different now, less patient, as if I had crossed a line I was never meant to see. I didn't mean to stay out there as long as I did. Fear has a strange way of slowing time, stretching seconds into something thick and hard to move through. By the time I realized how late it was getting, the light had already begun to fail. Dusk crept in quietly. Shadows pooled at the base of trees. The forest shifted colors, greens fading into gray and then into something darker. I turned back toward the cabin, walking fast but not running. I didn't want to sound like prey. That's when I felt it. That pressure again, the same feeling from the first night, like a tension settling on my back. I stopped. The forest ahead of me was still, too still, no wind, no birds. My ears rang with the sound of my own pulse. Then something moved, not close, not far, just enough to be seen. Between two trees a shape stepped forward and then stopped. It stood upright, taller than any man I'd ever known. Its outline was wrong, bending in places that shouldn't bend, shoulders sloping too far, arms hanging too long. I couldn't see details yet, just the shape, the idea of it. I took one slow step back. The shape copied me, perfectly. My stomach dropped. My legs went weak, but I stayed standing. The thing tilted its head, the motion smooth and curious, like it was studying a mirror. Light faded another notch, and that's when I saw its face. Not clearly, not fully, just enough. Skin stretched tight where it shouldn't be. Features pulled slightly out of place like they'd been arranged by memory instead of experience. And the eyes. They caught what little light was left and threw it back at me. Pale, reflective, unblinking. I wanted to scream. I didn't. The thing took a step closer. The smell reached me before anything else. That same copper scent, stronger now, mixed with something damp and rotten. I gagged and clamped my mouth shut. It opened its mouth. At first, nothing came out. Just a quiet click, like its jaw was adjusting. Then it smiled. The smile didn't reach its eyes. It was too careful, too practiced. Like it had seen people smile before and was trying to remember how. My hand shook so badly I dropped the pipe I'd been holding. It hit the ground with a dull thud. The sound seemed to please it. The thing leaned forward slightly, joints shifting in a way that made my skin crawl. I could hear its breathing now, uneven, wet, restrained. I took another step back. It followed, always matching me, never rushing, never touching. We stood there like that for what felt like forever, the space between us charged with something heavy and alive. I realized then that it could have reached me if it wanted to. It didn't. It wanted me aware. Finally, it turned its head slightly, listening to something I couldn't hear. Its smile faded. The eyes lingered on me a moment longer. Then it stepped back into the trees and vanished. No sound, no movement, just gone. I stood there shaking, lungs burning, until darkness fully claimed the forest. Only then did I run. I slammed the cabin door behind me and locked it, pressing my back against the wood as if that thin barrier meant anything at all now. Because I knew something I hadn't before. It didn't see me as food. It saw me as something else. Should I have left the forest right then, or would you have stayed to understand what it wanted? I didn't sleep again. I sat with my back against the door, knees pulled to my chest, eyes fixed on the thin cracks where moonlight slipped through the boards. Every sound made me flinch. Every shift of the cabin settling felt like a footstep. But the night stayed quiet. Too quiet. Morning arrived dull and cold. A low fog hugged the ground, turning the trees into pale shapes without depth. I opened the door slowly, half expecting it to be waiting on the porch. Nothing. Still, I didn't relax. I stepped outside and froze almost immediately. The path back to the truck was blocked. Not physically, not with branches or debris, but I could feel it. That same pressure from before, heavier now, pushing against my chest when I faced that direction. When I turned toward the trees instead, the pressure eased. I tested it again, one step toward the truck, tightness, nausea, a sharp pulse behind my eyes, one step toward the forest, relief. It wanted me to go that way. As the day went on, the signs grew clearer. Footprints appeared ahead of me, always just visible enough to notice, then disappearing when I got close. Branches snapped in the distance, not behind me, but ahead. Leading. Once I heard my own voice from somewhere deeper in the woods, not calling, talking, low, calm, saying words I remembered saying the night before. I pressed my hands to my ears and kept walking anyway. Fear had changed shape. It wasn't just terror anymore. It was confusion, a sixth sense of being guided through a story already written. By late afternoon, clouds rolled in again. The light dimmed fast, shadows stretching long and thin. The copper smell returned, stronger than ever, clinging to my clothes, my skin. I reached a place where the trees thinned, opening into a shallow clearing. The ground dipped sharply at the far end, hidden by brush and rock. I recognized it then. I had been here before, years ago, as a teenager, a place my grandfather had told me never to go near again. My chest tightened as memory stirred. He had grabbed my arm hard that day, harder than he ever had before. Told me some places don't forget who walks into them. I stepped closer. The air felt different here. Thick, charged. The silence was complete, swallowing even the sound of my breathing. I saw signs of movement everywhere now. Scratches, drag marks, old and new layered together. This wasn't just a path, it was a destination. That's when I felt it behind me. I didn't turn. I knew better. Its presence pressed close, close enough that I could feel warmth at my back. I heard it breathe, slow and controlled. Then it moved past me, not aggressive, not fast, purposeful. It stopped at the edge of the drop and stood there, looking down. When it turned its head slightly, just enough for me to see the side of its face, its mouth moved. It didn't speak. It waited. And in that moment, something horrible clicked into place. It wasn't hunting me. It was bringing me here. The thing wasn't trying to kill me. It needed me to see what was waiting below. I stood at the edge of the drop for a long time, staring down into the dark cut in the earth. It wasn't deep enough to be a ravine, but it wasn't shallow either. The ground sloped sharply into a hollow hidden by rock and twisted roots. The thing stood beside me, close enough now that I could feel the heat coming off it. Not warmth, something thicker, heavier. It lifted one long arm and pointed. The gesture was almost human. My legs felt numb as I took a step forward. The air changed instantly, colder and damp, carrying that copper smell so strong it burned the back of my throat. As I moved downhill, the forest above seemed to close in, branches knitting together like they wanted to hide what was below. At the bottom, I saw the bones, not scattered, not natural, arranged, long bones stacked carefully, skulls set facing outward, animal remains mixed with things I didn't want to identify at first. Clothing scraps tangled among them, old fabric, rotted leather, rusted metal buttons. This wasn't a kill site. It was a place of keeping. My stomach churned as I realized the arrangement wasn't random. It followed a pattern, circles within circles. Everything oriented toward a flat stone at the center. I stepped closer and froze. Carved into the stone were markings I recognized from the trees. The same long lines crossed by shorter ones. Repeated. Deliberate. I didn't need stories or books to understand what I was looking at anymore. The thing behind me shifted its weight. When I turned, it was standing fully in the open now. No shadows to hide it. Its body was tall and stretched, limbs slightly too long, joints bending at angles that made my eyes ache. Its skin looked like it didn't quite fit, pulled tight in some places and loose in others, as if it had been put on in a hurry. And its face. It was wrong in a way I can't fully explain. Familiar, but unfinished. Like it had been copied from memory instead of life. It opened its mouth, and this time the voice that came out wasn't mine. It was many voices, layered, struggling, sliding over each other. I heard men, women, old and young, some crying, some calm, some angry, all tangled together, trying to form words. That's when I knew. This thing didn't just mimic sound, it wore people. I stumbled back, my heel catching on a root. I fell hard, palms scraping against the dirt. The thing didn't move toward me. It watched. Patient. The smell was overwhelming now. Blood and metal and old decay. My eyes burned. I remembered my grandfather's voice. Respect keeps you alive longer than bravery. This wasn't a monster driven by hunger. This was something that learned, that observed, that took what it needed to survive longer. A skinwalker. The word formed in my mind without effort, heavy and final. The thing tilted its head again, watching my reaction closely. Its mouth moved, testing shapes, muscles shifting under stretched skin. It took a step closer, slow, careful, and for the first time I realized it wasn't threatening me. It was waiting for permission, for acknowledgement, for me to understand exactly what stood in front of me. Because once you name something like that, once you truly see it, you don't get to pretend it was just fear ever again. And the worst part was this. It looked relieved that I finally knew. I should have run. Every part of my body screamed for it. But my legs wouldn't listen. They felt rooted to the dirt, like the ground itself was holding me there. The thing stood only a few steps away now, close enough that I could see details I wished I couldn't. Its chest rose and fell, but not smoothly. The movement lagged, like it was remembering how breathing worked. Its skin caught the dim light wrong, stretched thin over bone in some places, loose and folded in others. I could see where it had tried to shape itself like a man and failed. It leaned forward slightly, studying my face with a focus that made my stomach twist. The voices came again, not layered this time, one at a time. A woman's voice first, soft, familiar, someone I hadn't heard in years. It spoke my name the way she used to, gentle and worried. Then it changed, a man's voice, older, calm, my grandfather. My chest tightened so hard I thought my ribs would crack. The thing's mouth moved slowly, carefully forming the sounds, watching me the whole time, measuring what worked. "Listen," it said in his voice. I shook my head, backing away until I felt the rock behind me. "Stop," I whispered. I didn't care if it heard. I needed the word out of me. It tilted its head again, almost confused. The eyes reflected the dim light, unblinking. The smell of copper grew stronger as it stepped closer. I could hear joints shift inside it, wet and strained. It wasn't threatening me. It was closing the space deliberately, forcing me to stay present, forcing me to listen. Its mouth opened wider than it should have, skin pulling tight around the edges. The voice that came out wasn't my grandfather's this time. It wasn't anyone I recognized. It was rough, broken, like something that didn't use words often. "We are not alone," it said. The words landed heavy, sinking straight through me. My heart pounded so hard I felt dizzy. It raised one long hand and pointed past me, back toward the forest, toward the cabin, toward the path home. Then it looked back at me. The expression on its face wasn't hunger. It was urgency. I realized then that the thing was changing. Its movements were less steady. Its breathing more strained. Dark fluid seeped from cracks in its skin, dripping onto the ground below. It was hurt, dying, and that terrified me more than anything else. Because whatever had kept it here, whatever balance it held, was breaking. It stepped back suddenly, body shuddering. The voices inside it rose again, overlapping, panicked now. It pressed its hand to its chest like it was trying to hold itself together. Then it looked at me one last time. And in my own voice, clear and perfect, it said, "You have to remember." The ground beneath us seemed to hum, low and deep, like something far below had noticed. The forest answered with a long, distant sound that wasn't wind and wasn't an animal. The thing staggered, collapsing to one knee, eyes locked on mine. Whatever it was about to tell me, whatever truth it had dragged me here to witness, was running out of time, and I knew, with sick certainty, that when it finished speaking, nothing about my life would fit together the same way again. The thing knelt there, shuddering, its chest rising in short, uneven pulls. Each breath sounded harder than the last, like air was scraping its way through something damaged inside. I didn't move. I was afraid that if I did, whatever fragile moment this was would shatter. The voices inside it faded until only one remained. Low, strained, almost honest. "It was never meant to last," it said. The words didn't come clean. They dragged themselves out, heavy with effort. Its fingers dug into the dirt, nails splitting, dark fluid soaking into the ground beneath it. I swallowed hard. "What are you?" I asked. The thing lifted its head slowly. When it looked at me, There was no mimicry in its face, no practiced expression, just something raw and failing. "A keeper," it said after a pause. "A door." My heart thudded painfully in my chest. It gestured weakly toward the hollow, toward the bones, the stone, the marks carved deep into earth and tree. "This place holds what people leave behind," it continued. "Fear, names, faces, promises." I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. "You kill people," I said. The words tasted bitter. The thing flinched. "Yes," it said, "and no." It took another shuddering breath. "Some come here already broken. Some wander. Some are sent." My skin prickled. Sent by who? The thing's eyes shifted past me, toward the deeper forest, toward places I couldn't see. "By blood," it said quietly. The meaning hit me like a blow. I thought of my grandfather, my father, the warnings that were never spoken, the land passed down without explanation, the rules without reasons. "You were never meant to be here," it said, voice weakening. "Not yet." My legs trembled. "Then why am I?" The thing struggled to lift itself, failed, and slumped back. Its breathing rattled now, wet and uneven. "Because I am failing," it said, "and when I fall, something else will listen." The ground hummed again, stronger this time. The bones around us vibrated softly, clicking together like teeth. The thing reached out toward me, stopping short, as if touching me was something it wasn't allowed to do. "You were born tied to this place," it said. "Your name was already here." My mouth went dry. "That's not possible." It looked at me with something like pity. "Names are older than bodies." The forest answered again, closer now, a deep sound that rolled through the trees and settled into my bones. Panic finally broke through my shock. "What do I do?" I asked. "How do I stop it?" The thing's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Almost." "You don't," it said. "You remember." It coughed, a thick, tearing sound. Dark fluid spilled from its mouth. Its body sagged, skin splitting along seams that shouldn't have been there. With what little strength it had left, it leaned closer and spoke one final sentence. Not in my voice, not in anyone's, but directly to me. "When I am gone, it will look for you." The hum beneath the ground surged, sharp and angry, and in that moment, as the thing began to collapse in on itself, I understood the truth that broke something deep inside me. This was never about survival. It was about inheritance. If this was you, would you run as far as you could, or stay because you were already part of it? The thing collapsed in on itself slowly, like a structure finally giving up after years of quiet strain. Its limbs folded at wrong angles, skin tearing with soft, wet sounds as it sank toward the dirt. I couldn't look away. The voices inside it rose one last time, not in panic, not in anger, but in release. A low rush of sound poured out of its open mouth, like breath leaving too many lungs at once. Then it went still. The eyes, once bright with reflected light, dulled and stared past me. Whatever force had held them together was gone. For a long moment, nothing happened. No sound, no movement. Even the forest seemed frozen, caught between breaths. Then the ground shuddered, not violently, not enough to knock me down. Just a slow, rolling shift beneath my feet, like something far below had turned over in its sleep. The carved stone at the center of the hollow cracked down the middle with a sharp sound that echoed through the trees. The markings etched into it began to crumble, flaking away into dust. Around us, the bones started to sink. Not collapsing, not scattering, sinking, pulled down into the earth as if the ground itself was swallowing them back up. The smell of copper faded, replaced by damp soil and rot. I stumbled backward, heart racing as the hollow began to close. Roots dragged themselves across the ground, knitting back together. Leaves fell from nowhere, covering what remained. Within minutes it looked like nothing had ever been there, except for one thing. At my feet lay a strip of skin. Not animal, not human. Thin, gray, drying quickly in the air. I stared at it, bile rising in my throat, until a terrible realization settled over me. It had shed it. Not left behind by accident. Left behind on purpose. The forest exhaled. Wind rushed through the trees all at once, bending branches, shaking loose needles and dust. Birds exploded into the air, their cries sharp and panicked. Life returned too fast, like something covering its tracks. I turned in a slow circle, disoriented, my ears ringing. That's when I felt it. That pressure again. But this time it wasn't coming from the forest. It was inside me. A pulling sensation deep in my chest, like a hook set too far in to remove. Memories surfaced that didn't feel like mine. Faces I didn't recognize. Names spoken in voices I'd never heard before. I dropped to my knees, gasping. Images flooded my mind. People walking into the woods alone, some scared, some desperate, some calm. All of them stepping into that hollow. All of them watched. I saw my grandfather among them, older than I ever knew him, standing at the edge of the clearing, eyes heavy with regret, turning away before the end. I understood then. The thing hadn't been lying. This place didn't just take lives. It took roles: caretaker, watcher, keeper. When the old one failed, something else had to remember. My hands dug into the dirt as the truth settled in my bones. The thing had not died protecting me. It had died passing something on. The forest didn't feel hostile anymore. It felt expectant, and somewhere deep beneath my fear, a quiet certainty formed. Whatever had been keeping that place contained was gone, and something had noticed me standing where it once did. I don't remember how I made it back to the cabin. I remember moving. I remember the forest shifting around me, branches brushing my shoulders, roots tugging at my boots like they wanted to slow me down. But time felt folded in on itself, moments stacked without order. By the time I reached the clearing, the sky had darkened again. Clouds pressed low, heavy with rain that hadn't fallen yet. The cabin looked smaller than before, older, like it had aged while I was gone. I stopped at the edge of the trees. That pressure inside my chest tightened, pulling me forward and holding me back at the same time. My head rang with sounds that weren't quite voices and weren't quite memories. Faces drifted through my thoughts and vanished before I could hold on to them. I knew then that leaving wouldn't be simple. I stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked under my weight, loud in the thick air. I unlocked the door with shaking hands and went inside, closing it behind me more out of habit than belief. The cabin felt different, not colder, not warmer, occupied. I stood still, listening. The silence hummed softly, like something waiting for instruction. That's when I heard it. A low sound beneath the floorboards, not scratching, not movement, breathing, slow, deep, patient. My stomach dropped. I backed away from the sound, heart pounding, until my shoulders hit the wall. The breathing continued, steady and calm, like whatever made it had all the time in the world. I remembered the thing's final words. When I am gone, it will look for you. The floor shuddered once. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. The breathing grew louder. Then it stopped. A knock sounded at the door. Not 3 taps, just one, firm. I stared at the door, every muscle locked. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The knock came again. Then a voice. Not mine, not my grandfather's, not anyone I recognized. It spoke calmly, evenly, like a neighbor asking to borrow something. You don't have to be afraid, it said. The pressure in my chest flared hot, almost painful. Images rushed forward again, bones sinking into earth, skin left behind, eyes dulling as something older shifted awake. I know you're there, the voice continued. You were always meant to be. The breathing beneath the floor resumed, deeper now, closer. I backed away until I couldn't anymore, palms pressed flat against the wall. My mind screamed to run, to fight, to do anything. But another part of me, quiet and cold, understood something terrible. This wasn't an attack. It was an arrival. The cabin creaked as something moved underneath it, boards bowing slightly with the weight of whatever passed below. The smell returned, damp earth, metal, old rot. The voice outside softened. "Open the door." I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "No," I whispered. Silence followed. Then the pressure inside my chest eased, not gone, just waiting. The breathing faded. The weight beneath the cabin shifted away, receding slowly into the ground. The voice did not return. I slid down the wall, collapsing onto the floor, gasping for air. Rain finally began to fall outside, heavy and sudden, drumming against the roof. I stayed there until morning. When dawn came, the forest looked normal again. Too normal. No signs of disturbance. No tracks. No marks beneath the cabin. But I knew better, because the pressure never left. And as I packed my things and drove away, I felt it settle deeper, quieter, like something learning how to live inside me. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. Whatever had woken up knew exactly where I was going. I'm telling you this now because I don't think silence works anymore. I left that land the morning after and never went back. I sold my share to a distant relative and moved states within a month. I changed routines, changed jobs, changed how close I let people get. From the outside, it probably looked like I was just starting over. Inside, nothing ever reset. The pressure stayed with me. Not pain, not fear. Something steadier. Like a presence that didn't need to announce itself to be known. At first, it only surfaced when I was tired or alone. A pull in my chest when I stood in quiet places. A hum beneath my thoughts when the world went still. I told myself it was trauma. I was wrong. Over the years, small things started happening around me. Animals avoiding my property. Strangers pausing mid-conversation, staring at me like they were trying to remember something important. Children going quiet when I walked past. Once I heard my own voice speak from another room when I knew I hadn't moved. That was the night I understood what had really been passed on. It wasn't a role that chained me to one place. It was a responsibility tied to blood and memory. I started dreaming about places I had never been. Forests thicker than the one I left. Clearings with stones already cracked. Hollows that felt empty in the wrong way. In every dream, I arrived just after something ended. Just in time to notice. I don't hurt anyone. I need you to understand that. Whatever lives near me now doesn't act the way it used to. It watches. It waits. Sometimes it tests, but only enough to be sure. It learned from the one before it, and it learned from me. That's the part I'm most afraid of, because sometimes, when I'm standing alone in the dark, I feel the pressure ease. Like something is satisfied, like something believes I'm doing my job without being told. I don't know how many others like me there are. I don't know how long this has been happening, only that it's older than any story I've heard and smarter than any rule we think protects us. I don't think the thing I met was the first, and I know it wasn't the last. I'm telling you this because if you ever feel watched in a place that shouldn't remember you, if you hear your name spoken with too much care, if the forest feels patient instead of wild, don't answer, and don't assume it wants to hurt you. Sometimes it wants to hand something off. Sometimes it's looking for someone who will remember when it can't anymore. I still wake up some nights with the smell of copper in my nose, still hear breathing beneath the floorboards of houses that aren't built over anything at all, and once in a while I catch my reflection doing something a second too late, smiling. If this story unsettles you, that's good. It means you're still just listening. I wasn't. I was chosen. And if the land ever learns your name the way it learned mine, you won't need this warning. You'll already feel it waiting.